Hello everyone, welcome to We Like Creepypasta. This is a Squidward suicide episode, a special episode that was requested by a certain person who decided to randomly comment on one of my videos. I was an intern for Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't, but you did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I work directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the episodes days before they were aired. I'll get to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it looked to them no longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received a copy that was supposed to be Fear of the Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't the final yet, animators often put up a mock title card of sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, often sometimes lewd titles, such as Rockabye by Valve. When SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop, nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So we saw the title card, Squidward's Suicide. We didn't think more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh and did it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as normal. The Squidward starts with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as the concert that he needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubbles splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things began to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with the animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not the normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame, looks visibly afraid. The shot goes through the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What's very odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused. But since we weren't the writers, we didn't question the appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed looking very forlorn. The view of the porthole in the window is the night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is there is no sound, literally no sound, not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if all the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there blinking in his silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, or tentacles, over his face and cried softly for a full minute more, while a sound in the background was very slowly growing to nothing but barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's noticeable if you look at 10 shots 10 seconds apart, side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists on itself, and for a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is that this sound and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if there were holes the sound was coming through from the other side. As good as the sound the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to produce that sound quality. The lead animation animator paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloody, one eye dangling over his upturned face popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open. The most upsetting part was there was a shadow of the photographer. There were no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were of course mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, sobbing louder than before and half body in the frame. There was now what appeared to be blooding run down from his eyes. The blood was also a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched it you'd get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it were a gale blowing through the forest. The laughing, a deep baritone lasting longer intervals, and coming more frequently after about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. After 5 seconds after this second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all the sound. Just like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down and his eyes were now down to a hyper-realism like the others were at the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, mixed with fear. Tears and blood were dripping down his face. The sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing. This time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop the 4th and back up. This time the photo was a boy about the same age, but this time was different. The entrails were just being pulled out of a stomach wound by a large hand, and right eye popped it dangling, blood trickling down from it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next, same thing. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it. We saw the 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call on the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within 15 minutes. He was so confused of why he was called down here. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound then stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face for about 3 seconds. The shot deeply panned, and we heard a deep voice that said, "Do it!" And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatter on the walls behind him and his bed, and he flies back with force. The last 5 seconds of this episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling of what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. The episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch again. Viewing the episode twice only served imprint to the entirety of my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm so sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was this was edited by someone in the chain of the drawing studio down there. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file didn't show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. The equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the same timestamp may have glitched and shown the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happen and I can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Squidward Suicide.